So I'm going to have them do a little bit of their background, but I met Manish actually through his involvement in the Shamatha project, and I think he'll tell you a little bit about that, but it's really one of the most ambitious meditation research projects in history, really incredible. And he actually comes at this from an interesting perspective with both a computer science background originally leading into a neuroscience background, and he's now actually a professor at Stanford focusing on some really interesting aspects of neuroscience. And then Robert actually met through a mutual friend. Robert has a really incredible background. Please have a seat. Here, maybe I'll sit on the end here. So Robert has a Robert has a great background, and he'll go into some detail as well. But past president of the San Francisco Zen Center. You've meditated at least like 20 times, I bet. More. Yeah. He gets at least 5 minutes in every day, sure. And we actually brought Robert in to lead a short meditation during the Transformative Technology Conference that we ran a few weeks ago, which was a really incredible event. And I remember standing backstage watching Robert and then watching the audience, and it was like a guided meditation. And I was really worried that the audience was going to go into like some kind of samadhi, like enlightened state, and they weren't going to be able to like focus on any of the talks after, because the guided meditation was so awesome. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
What I want to do is I want to do a little bit of quick background for each of you, and then after that I want to kind of just dive right in to the juicy stuff. And to give a little introduction, the reason why I brought these two people together is because I think that one of the interesting spaces of inquiry in this whole consciousness hacking domain is around the intersection of spirit and science, of the subjective and the objective, of the quantitative approach to understanding reality and the personal introspective direct observation approach to understanding reality. And there was a long time where these were very separate, and there seems to be a bridging happening, a convergence. And the fact that these two people are sitting in front of a room where the title of the event is called Consciousness Hacking, if there isn't a sign that this is happening, I don't know, I don't know what is. This is it. So let's start with some intros and let's dive right into that space. And for intros, just maybe a little bit of how you kind of came onto this path, and a little bit of your background, what you've sort of done on that path.
Manish, please.
Okay, I'll do that. My name is Manish Sagar, as you already said that. I was happily working in AI and robotics at UT Austin, and had no idea about meditation research until I came to Google 2006 to do a summer internship, mostly to collect free stuff. And while I was doing that, in one of those talks where you get free stuff, I met Alan Wallace.
Keep talking. No, you're good.
He's a monk who has studied with Dalai Lama. And his talk was very, very cool, obviously. And when I talked to him afterwards, I told him I also meditate and I love to program. And we were just chatting, and he said, we have a really cool project coming up. It's called the Shamatha project. And we need somebody like you to design algorithms to better understand what happens in the brain when people do really intensive meditation. And we have these signals. So basically, we need somebody to do signal processing, machine learning. Are you interested? I was like, wow, that's so cool. But the problem was, how am I going to, sorry, this is very short. How am I going to go back and tell my computer science professor that I want to do meditation research while I stay in computer science? That was a big problem, I thought. And when I went back from Google, I talked to the professor, and when I told him, I was surprised that he said right away, yeah, that's a cool thing, let's do it. And so that's how I got into the Shamatha project. But I've been meditating since I was almost 13 years old, so that's my passion as well. And after that, I came to psychiatry rather than going back to Google. So Google shouldn't have Buddhist monks come and give talks.
And can you while we're on the topic, can you give us a sense of the scale, of the breadth? What was the Shamatha project?
Sure. So the Shamatha project was mainly the brains behind it is Clifford Saron from UC Davis. He's a research associate professor there.
And past speaker at Consciousness Hacking.
Cool, past speaker here. So he, with Richie Davidson and other people in the field, got together and thought of doing this very cool project where they took around 60 people who are living normal life like you and me, to a meditation retreat center where they meditated on average for 6 hours every day for 3 months. And initially we thought, well, good luck finding people. But turns out there were at least, I think, 6 times more applications than we had spots. So we had to actually choose them, and they actually paid for their lodging and stuff to be part of this awesome project. But apart from all that, we then collected, I think the big pull was probably Alan Wallace himself, was like a Buddhist teacher who has learned from Dalai Lama, was going to be there for the whole 3 months. That was probably a big pull. And of course, they wanted to help science. So they were there for 3 months, and we collected their, I think, 17 different psychological assessments in the beginning of the retreat, the middle, and the end. We did EEG collection, data collection, brain activity, and so on. And we had this very cool design really quickly where we had 30 people who would come in first, and they were part of this retreat, and we scanned them at 3 time points. We had 30 age-matched controls who would just flew in just for the testing part, and then they would go back to their homes, and then 6 months later they come back and they do their own retreat. So the coolest part about this project was we could not only do between group analysis and find results, but we also replicated results within completely 2 different retreats. So
and just to paint this picture, you had essentially I've seen these pictures, you had a neuroscience lab that you built at this meditation retreat center in the middle of nowhere.
On top of the mountain.
On top of a mountain. I mean, it's really incredible. And you collected, I mean, an astounding amount of data.
Yeah,
I mean, there's still like only like a small fraction of the way of pouring through all the data that you collected.
All thanks to Cliff and his awesome team.
Yeah. Awesome project.
Yep.
Cool.
Wow. Yeah. Great.
Hey, Robert.
Hey, Mikey. Can you hear me okay? No. Okay. Now can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Now you can hear me? Okay, good. Thank you. I came to San Francisco in my early 20s, and from 1983 to 1993, I started 3 companies, one which was a complete disaster, one which was kind of okay, and one which was a big success. And I was standing 3 years after starting the big success one. I was standing in the middle of a bunch of people. I was 34 years old at that time, and I knew, it was kind of like your story. I knew that this was not it. I knew that this wasn't going where I wanted to go. I knew it in my heart. And the next day, I told my partner I was getting out, and I was going on a journey. And so from that was like 23 years ago, and I started, and I said I need to do something as different as possible. As I need to put myself in situations that are going to challenge me at the very core of my being. And I found Buddhist practice in Thailand. I became a Zen monk. I lived in a Zen monastery for 6 years. And during that time, we practiced, meditation 10 to 12 hours a day. And I found out that I liked it, I enjoyed it, and my life completely changed. I became a Zen priest. I have a teacher, his name's Norman Fisher. I received Dharma transmission from him, and so I became a teacher. At some point, I became as Mikey said, the kind of the CEO of this Zen group in San Francisco, and I've been living there for 23 years in the mountains of the monastery, and then also in the city for the last 15 years. And maybe that's good. Maybe that's a good start. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So the the title of this meetup is something like a Zen priest and a neuroscientist on the future of awakening. And there's a word there, right, which is increasingly kind of a little bit of a buzzword.
Future?
Future
No.
of
No.
the word awakening, which gets used in a lot of different contexts in a lot of different ways, and I thought we would start there, right? To just kind of like I don't think we're gonna establish the definition of awakening or enlightenment like right here in this meetup, but maybe as an exploration and some different perspective. Can we start from a Zen Buddhist perspective? What do you think is being pointed to when people talk about awakening, and is that different? And if it is different, what is being pointed to when people talk about, for example, enlightenment, or is one of the words that's used for the highest attainment of? Sure.
Almost as a synonym, awakening, enlightenment. Yeah. So in the Zen, my tradition is Zen Buddhist, even though I practiced in the Tibetan tradition and the Vipassana tradition. And awakening implies, waking up from something. Yeah, from what? From what? Maybe from being asleep. From in Zen, we say from being in a dream, like that in our normal everyday life is like being in a dream. That's a key kind of metaphor. It's like sleepwalking. Yeah. So in this dream world, we think that we are separate from everything. We think that we are living just, myself, and there's other people out there. In this dream world, we think that we need to protect ourselves because of this separation, because of this sense of isolation. We need to protect ourselves from others. We need to, hold ourselves in a kind of way. And so when we wake up to the realization or the sense of, or the truth that we, in fact, are not so separate. We're not so distinct, separate, abiding as this thing, as we think we are. And so we wake up to our sense, and in Zen we don't, we focus very much on the present moment. So this waking up is actually waking up to our true self, our true nature, and it's something that happens moment after moment. It happens in this moment. It's not a state. It's not a fixed state. It's happening in this moment. Or not. So it's happening in this moment. Yeah, it could only be happening in this moment. It couldn't be happening in the last moment or in the next moment. It could only be happening in this moment.
Now, so there's an interesting paradox that arises, right? Because that seems to be like a pointer we often hear, right? And that seems to be part of this recognition, is the recognition that it is always here, always present, always available. Yet, from kind of a mind perspective, a separate perspective, there seems to be this also a notion of like a progression. Like, okay, we're going to meditate, and we're going to go through these steps, and we're going to progress along some sort of set of stages, and then at some point at the end of these stages, there's some shift that happens. how do we reconcile what we observe, and people, and this seems to, from an outside perspective, you kind of watch the progression of someone's life, it's like seeker, 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 and then maybe there's nothing to seek. Why should you seek for anything? You know, all of a sudden something is different. How do we reconcile that?
I bet Manish has a lot of data on that one.
Well, that's next. This is my transition question.
Okay. Do you want me to answer that question?
Well, yeah, from a contemplative perspective, and then from there, I want to talk about this same idea of kind of this idea of this always here, always aware, you know, this immediately available idea versus this sort of state change kind of idea, and then talk about that from a scientific neuroscience perspective as well.
Yeah, yeah. But the metaphor that's used in Zen practice for this, and it's actually, well, it's a path. You know, we set ourselves out in a direction, on a path, and then we take the next step and we move into the next moment. And there's this, you know, this path, the implication there is that we're moving forward. We're moving forward into the next moment, into the next moment. So the kind of the archetype, the model for this person who's moving from moment to moment is called the bodhisattva. And so the bodhisattva is the being that vows to live their life for the benefit of everything. Not just themselves, but everything. So this vow kind of propels or supports the person to move into the next moment, into the next moment. So what we start to see in practice is that, you know, this moment conditions this moment, conditions this moment, and that's how our meditation or bringing our awareness or waking up happens in this moment, and then that conditions the next moment, and that conditions the next moment. So there can be a sense of like continuity there when we really kind of apply ourselves, when we practice. So in Zen, this enlightenment or this awakening is never separate from the practice, never separate from the effort that we make, even if it's a effortless effort, the effort that we make to be in this moment, the effort that it takes to be here. So that can look like, okay, now everything's different, and that's this, you know, that's available to us, any of us, all of us, and this is what the Buddha taught. He says we are actually from the beginning Buddha. And it's not like we have to go and transform into somebody else, something else that makes us Buddha, but we actually have to, this waking up is in a way letting go of this dream me that we've created and realizing that I am just this. And I am this, and this is all of this. And it's, in a sense, perfect how it is. So does that answer your question?
I'm not expecting my question to be totally answered. This is one of the interesting counterpoints, right, between science and spirituality. And now the Zen tradition is even a little bit different also, because some Buddhist paths have more of a kind of an established path, right? The stages of a meditator, right? Whereas the Zen tradition isn't so big on the stages of progression, right?
We're not so big on that. No,
Yeah.
no. We're ready. You know, right now these conditions right here are the conditions for us to wake up. And so we're kind of focused in on that. But even that, and maybe we'll talk about this later as we start to talk about skillful means, but even that can take a long time to realize.
Right.
A long time,
right.
Years.
So now you meditated for probably the equivalent of years of your life, I would imagine.
Sure.
And Manish, you were part of a project where people meditated for 3 months. Pretty
Pretty intense.
12 hours a day probably.
6 to 10, yeah.
How much? What?
6 to 10, yeah.
6 to 10 hours a day. And you were looking to see what can be measured. What measurable changes, right? Is this the way to describe this? What measurable changes, using these different sort of techniques of measurement that we have at our disposal, what measurable changes are there to someone that meditates for 3 months straight? First, can you give us an idea of like what changes in the brain and the psychology of someone after that amount of time?
Well, it's a very difficult question, but just to try to define the awakening thing. If taking Robert's definition of awakening, science is in coma right now.
Okay.
So if you're asleep, science is far, far away from looking at it that way because it's a very difficult problem. And that's the reason I'm talking about awakening in general, to measure awakening or something. And there's probably a good reason for that because we probably cannot measure it. It's very hard to measure, maybe that's why we don't have it, or maybe that nobody has done it, either one of the reasons. But in Shamatha, that's why our goal was to try to measure things that are measurable, that are quantifiable in some way.
Yeah.
So I think of it this way, that meditation is what it does to you. It's very hard to probably measure that first-person perspective apart from just taking interviews and structured interviews, and people have done that. But what Shamatha was trying to do was to measure, I don't want to say it's side effects, but side effects in the sense that side effects to the cognitive functioning, your hormonal changes all the way down to the gene expressions. You don't necessarily are meditating for that reason. If you're meditating to get enlightened, you don't necessarily care if your telomere is of this length or that length, and you probably should not, and hopefully there's no app saying, okay, telomere is this much now, and keep going. I mean, your goal is enlightenment. But in this project, yeah, you're right. So we looked at attention, we looked at perceptual discrimination. So we wanted to see, one of these tasks was perceptual discrimination, where the idea was to give somebody a really boring job to do for 32 minutes. And most people, and it's a very simple task, you give them 2 lines, and the job is you have to answer every trial, every few seconds I would ask you which one is bigger or which one is shorter. And the trick there is it's adaptable, so if you're very easy, it's quite easy for you, then they'll start increasing the length of the shorter one until it's barely recognizable, barely recognizably different from the other one. So some of these tasks were used to then measure sustained attention. This is an aspect of cognition which you could have, which every day I think we go through. For example, if you're trying to read a paper and you are dozing off, that's showing that you don't have sustained attention and you need a Starbucks coffee or some other coffee. But we wanted to see whether these meditators, after going through this much, trying to focus every day for 6 to 10 hours on their breath or some other mechanisms or some other kind of meditation, should give them some greater cognitive enhancement to do this task better and for longer. And that's exactly what we found. So what we did is we took and I'm saying we, but this is all Cliff and his team. I actually came into the project a little later. But in terms of designing the experiment and the study, the idea was to take correlates of meditation. So if you're focusing, let's measure focus on something really boring, or measure your emotion regulation when you are, so the meditators claim that when they meditate a lot, they're very good at regulating their emotions. So let's test it. So how do you test it? You show them very disgusting videos or pictures to look at, which are supposed to, not disgusting in a sense, but they're supposed to engage or bring about very negative emotions of anger, disgust, fear, and then see whether that is sustainable through the retreat. So this very quick finding I will just quickly tell you. It was recently published using this thing called FACS, facial recognition. We can find out your emotions. If you have seen the CDs Lie to Me, he does that all the time somehow. So you can do it by almost semi-automated software with a lot of help from experts, where they found that when they showed these meditators in the beginning of the retreat, say a video or a photo which would bring in a lot of anger, we could see the anger would go up, and the video is over, but the anger is still up through the face. They could see from a hidden camera. But after the retreat, similar video, not the exact same video, we found people would still get angry the same way, but they would come down right after. So this kind of transition, we talk about, in all traditions, they talk about meditation is good for you. So if you have a bad incident, if you're, like in my case today, phone dies, car is not working, GPS is not working, and you're late, don't stay mad, don't have this anger linger on, get out of it as soon as possible. So things like that. In addition, we also had blood samples taken where we actually did measure the length of telomere. That's like the zipper of your chromosome, which it's supposed to have a good amount of length, otherwise the cell replication stops or degenerates. So we found that, and it's a very nice marker of aging. So I think they found this, I was not part of this paper, but in this big study, part of the study was that they found that the reduction in telomere that is supposed to happen anyways was reduced. So it didn't reduce as fast as it would reduce if you're not meditating. But that was pretty cool.
So very, very interesting. I mean, a number of really interesting findings. Now, one of the reasons why I'm sure such good science was done is because it was fairly conservative,
yeah.
right? What was being measured, right?
Yeah.
Can we measure changes in attention, right? Can we measure how someone recovers from a sort of a negative emotional shift,
mm-hmm.
right? But my guess is that the people going into this retreat were not looking for like a 22% increase in how they recovered from emotion after seeing an ugly picture, or looking to have like sustained attention on a moving target for more than a couple minutes.
Yeah.
They were looking for something a little bit more profound, something closer to what we're sort of broadly calling awakening here, and this is elusive, right? This is a little bit hard to talk about. It's hard to talk about from a contemplative perspective. It's hard to talk about from a scientific perspective, right? Because it seems like both parties have to describe something that's very difficult, if not impossible, to actually describe.
Yep.
Yet it seems to also be an aspect of our human experience. And let's not even just talk about awakening. Let's just talk about this idea that there really is, anyone, for example, that's taken psychedelics, recognizes that there is really a realm of profound human experience that's outside of our everyday space of experience. And I bet you quite a few people on that retreat mm-hmm. were able to drop into experiences like that.
Maybe, and that's why we're the next part is, that's why it began by saying that the only person that can tell it is that person.
Is that person, right?
And that's the first person perspective.
Yes.
And science is beginning to take that word from that participant, that whatever he's saying or she's saying, maybe there is some truth to it. They're developing methods, even in Shamatha, I think Baljinder Sahadra, one of the colleagues in this project, she's working towards deciphering these structured interviews to come up with some method. Again, we have to quantify, to be able to quantify either the same concept or construct that these people felt. But yes, I agree with you, it's hard, but maybe we can do it, I don't know.
I mean, so it's an open question, right? I mean, is there some fundamental block, some fundamental problem here that, for example, prevents science from really being able to describe, to quantify, to build a model of the experiences that are reported by people that, like Alan Wallace, I'm sure, Robert, you could report quite a few interesting experiences to this group that are reported by people that experience profound transformation through some kind of contemplative path. Are these like oil and water, or can they be compatible? For either of you.
Okay. Well, you had to think basic science is far, far away, and that's why I started by saying if awakening means, and it does mean getting up, then science is in coma, because science is very incremental in nature by design, and we don't really even understand fully attention. let alone awakening. But yeah, we are getting there, I think. But you're also right that this concept is very elusive. The definition itself is hard. Yes. And I don't know if any language can ever serve the purpose to define it. Or maybe that's the beauty of this concept. If it was definable, nobody would want to have it. Maybe that's it.
Yeah. You know, when people do sit and they find themselves very concentrated and they have good guidance and the conditions that support them to go deep in their practice, they have naturally. The conditions are right for them to have all kinds of experiences that seem like the normal self kind of dropping away, and a spaciousness or an expansiveness that can be similar to some kind of psychedelic drugs or something like that, or different. But you know, there's many famous stories in Zen where the student goes in and says something about their awakening, and the Zen master says, "Have you washed your bowls from breakfast?" Something like that. You know, it like doesn't mean so much, really. And it's very easy for us as just, and this is part of our kind of our dream walking or our sleepwalking. It's very easy for us to attach to those and think, well, something happened. You know, something important must have happened, and then to try to like get back there or recapture that or find that again. And so I think the whole sense is that, well, we need to, sure, learn from that, receive it, maybe have something to teach us, show us, reveal to us, and then we take the next step. And the next step is probably very different than the last step. But the last thing I want to say is that ultimately, I think most spiritual traditions would be aligned with this. I think ultimately, the awakening needs to lead us to some kind of place where actually we don't have a sense of I found this place, but actually we have more of a sense of I don't know. More of a sense of, you know, I actually don't, the real wisdom there is the wisdom that we don't know. Right. We don't know. And to stay with that and to move into that is actually, you know, the wisdom practice.
And I agree with you. That does seem to be a common voice of wisdom that you hear, an increased moving into not knowing, right? An increased reluctance to actually say what this is or what it's all about, right? But at the same time, right, and this is the tricky thing, and this is where we have this difficult thing to reconcile between a kind of an I have like a perspective of looking at these things, right? There's a way of describing these things that are useful to the student, to the seeker, right? Because as a seeker, as someone kind of on a spiritual path, if you say, oh yeah, don't worry, you'll get there in like 2 years, you know, or like, you know, you just have to meditate for like 1,000 more hours and then maybe you'll arrive at this destination, you're kind of screwing that person over, right? Because they've taken on a perspective which is in a way fundamentally wrong, right? It's already placing, it's already conceptualizing an experience that can't be conceptualized into some future state where arguably time doesn't even exist. There's only this present moment experience. I mean, it's really a horrible backwards pointer to instill in someone the idea that there's this place to get to, right? So from the teacher hat, right, you would never want to do that, right? You always want to bring people back to the present, bring people back to the present, bring people back, right? But how do we reconcile that with science, right? Where there is space, there is time, right? We do have a model of this sort of linearity, this movement where patterns of neuron firing changes over time, right? Where we have actual biological measurable changes in the telomeres. I mean, we actually have real measurable change that happens that corresponds, and it may correspond to someone increasingly saying, I don't know actually. But when they say that, they seem to also say it from an increased space of of openness. Something, there's a twinkle in the eye, right? There's a recognition there. There's an understanding beyond understanding, right? And there's a reluctance to say, no, that's a thing, right? But at the same time, so now I'm putting my Mikey hat on, right? This is my perspective, the enlightenment engineering hat, right? If we want to build new technologies to really follow along with like the bodhisattva vow, right? To really follow along with this intention to eradicate human suffering by any means, right? Then it's important to be able to simultaneously recognize, right, the inherent nowness of what we're pointing towards, but also, if it's possible, build a model of it. Because if we can't scientifically understand, quantify what's going on, then it's very difficult to build technologies based on that. Because basically, technology is built based on scientific understanding. You can't really build a technology based on a Buddhist understanding, right? Unless it's just a recorded meditation or something like that, right? So, I don't know if that brings anything up for you guys, but
I was just gonna say that and I completely. So I'm a meditator as well, as I said earlier, and I've been meditating since I was 13 years old. Not as much as you, like way too little. I've, through my own personal experience, science out, I have a feeling that whenever we try to put a progress bar on something, it's like, where am I now, am I done? And that not necessarily is going to work in this case. Because the idea here is actually that you stop analyzing. And you, as he said multiple times, be there, just be there for God's sake, forget about everything else, your iPhone, your... so whenever I try to, and being a scientist, engineer, and trying to meditate, I've also been looking for these things. Any marker that I could find that could tell me, am I there yet, or because I don't feel it? Yes, it's our constant struggle. But I also realized that, and I think when we discussed earlier, you talked about this, is that we are just preparing ground. So think of yourself as a seed, or your spirituality is a plant that's going to come out of the seed. Your enlightenment, awakening will come out. All you can really do is to prepare the ground. And that's about it. And to that extent, yes, you can measure, probably, make sure sunlight is there, air is there, water is there, and manure is there, or whatever, the soil is healthy enough. But that's about it. And then let it happen.
So, okay, I'm passionate about this topic, so I'm getting involved here. So, like, you know, it's I think it's more interesting if I kind of like express perspective here. So, so there's an interesting. If we could take this to an extreme, right? We could push it all the way to the end kind of scenario, right? And we can talk about this metaphor that I like to call the enlightenment button. Okay, so gets people really excited when I say that. This is like the extreme example here, right? You use a metaphor of preparing the ground, right? Now, imagining like you're preparing the ground, the fertile soil, tilling the soil, right? Is there some notion of doing that so skillfully, so carefully, so effectively, right? Imagine the ultimate technology, one that like, you know, this is like however many years in the future, we're monitoring in perfect resolution the full like 3D model of everything electrically and magnetically that's happening inside your brain, even inside your body, right? In real time, and you're in a full immersive VR experience, and it's providing this like perfect feedback that's shifting and changing in every imaginable way to adjust to you and support you. And it's like the ultimate advance of, you know, contemplative technology, right? And it's like the best way imaginable to prepare the ground. Is there any inherent limitation? Is there any fundamental speed limit on the highway of awakening here? Or is it possible to have some system in the future where we really can squeeze every ounce of wisdom from ancient traditions and then every ounce of understanding from modern science and allow people in a very short amount of time to shift to the unshiftable, to know the unknowable, to recognize that they were always there, to laugh at themselves for putting this thing on and saying, ha ha ha, why did I even use this? I was always there in the first place, you know? Is that possible?
Mikey's good.
Just quick thing then. Okay, so let's take another analogy. So if I get in an accident and I hurt my leg really bad and they have to put a plaster on, I have to have a plaster on, and that's going to help me heal. But after my leg is healed, I do not want the plaster on, right? I want the plaster to be off.
Yes.
Now, that's where I feel that there is that danger, tiny danger there, that if we really do need the plaster, absolutely go get the plaster in form of any technology you want. But the underlying goal is to make your muscle healthy again. And if you lose the sight of that the underlying goal is to not necessarily make sure the neuron fires at the optimal pace, but it's for our mind, and again, it's out of science, I'm again out of science space, but it's for the mind, the mental muscle to be built so that you're not dependent on these technologies. As long as we don't lose sight of that, then we're good. But if we do lose it, then we are dependent on something else again, and then it'll be another problem. Because there are bugs in every software.
Yes. Especially in the Matrix.
Well, when I first started practice, I was in an intensive retreat, and my best buddy was this guy who had just come from MIT, and he was like super brain, and we were with our teacher, and he asked him, well, and this guy was so smart that he was having a really hard time kind of just going with it. And he says, well, what is it that we're learning? You know? And the guy looked at him and said, we're learning to be a human being. So I appreciated when you, earlier tonight, when you mentioned love and connection and all of and kind of that aspect of practice, you know, that kind of heart aspect of practice. But I also appreciated what Manish said when you described your studies. They weren't so much studies about mapping kind of the, even though there may have been that component, but it wasn't focused on like light going on in the brain, but you were focused on, well, what was the impact in actual actions, you know, in the you know, their ability to, with cognitive function or even emotional reactions, stuff like that. I think that's the place. I think that's actually the place where there's a huge potential for technology, is to measure in those ways, because our awakening doesn't happen by ourselves. It happens when we go out and meet and interact with the objects of our life, you know, of the people. You know, that may be great in this virtual reality and everything's perfect. And then we have to walk and this, oh my God, this shows up.
And then you go home to visit your family.
That's right. So how do we wake up in that moment when everything's coming forward, when our, you know, all of our delusion, all of our this dream world is like has us, you know, enveloped in it. Then what happens? What do we do then? So I think it has to. In Zen, we in traditional forms of practice, we put people into a kind of container. It's almost like a crucible or something like that, a monastery, a place of practice, and we have to bump up against each other, and we have to figure out, and we have to notice, and every single person is supporting each other to wake up. So that's the baseline. But then it's like, it's messy, and it's really difficult to be in community with other people, and so you start to, you kind of like learn it as you. I'm not so sure you'd want to skip over the difficult learnings or the difficult moments of your life that can teach us so much. I think this inherently, this path is going to be messy and require some deep fundamental challenge to us, and I don't think we can skip over that. Actually, myself, I love the idea of enlightenment.
But I guess well, we can talk about this forever. But I guess there's a question of, is it possible to actually skip anything? Is that even a possibility? Because it would presuppose some predefined notion of what you are supposed to have gone through, what challenges you're supposed to have faced, and who decides that? How do we know?
Yeah.
And you know, so I think it's like, I think you're right, but at the same time, well, what if those challenges only take 15 minutes?
That's
you
sure.
know, we don't know.
Yes, right.
And
Good point.
Yeah.
But we did, actually, my dissertation was on finding the neural correlates, like what lights up in your brain.
Oh, yeah, okay, good.
That was the PhD
part of it.
But we were trying to, because we all know, and I think there is, last year, if you go to PubMed.com, the place for all the papers, last year there was 2 papers every day on meditation. 2 papers, and these are good scientific journals. And mostly they're talking about what it does. And very few journals, or very few papers, or very few studies talk about how it does. So that was the part we were trying to, and by how it does, I mean what changes in the brain when you meditate so much. That's it, not awakening, nothing else. When you're doing it that long, what changes? And we did find changes. We found that, well, so these guys were focusing right here at the nostril, breath in, breathe in, breathe out, and they're trying to sustain their focus here. So we did find that their tactile sensory areas, post-somatosensory areas, had more activity after the retreat, pretty good. That also correlated with some performance enhancement, pretty good, so it makes sense. It's not just...
Where would people find out about, if they wanted to actually look up?
Oh, it's published, it's on my webpage.
What would they, if they just Google Shamatha Project?
They Google Shamatha Project or my name.
Because I have a feeling there's going to be some curious people that are going to want to like...
So we actually went a step, so again, putting my science back on, and stop me because I might go into this thing.
Okay,
and
because we also want to
speak forever.
Get into that
really quickly, so I also then, we moved on one step further, and then this is where we're talking about models. So we actually I created a model that simulated what the brain might be doing when you're meditating.
Wow.
Because that's the only way you can go inside without really killing anyone, right? And this was a very toy model, but all models are toy, otherwise there will be brain. So this is a very toy model which only takes into account certain aspects of the brain. So thalamus, the layers of thalamus and cortex, and we try to simulate the brain, and because we had data from people's brain data, so we could see how close we are. So we made sure it fitted the best, and then we could look in time how the model parameters are changing. So this is again not in the real brain, but in the model itself, we found that there were changes at the subcortical level due to this meditation training, associated with the meditation training. That explains a lot why they were able to sustain attention for that long. So yes, there is a marker, there's some kind of biomarker, neuroscience marker that you can get to.
A relationship,
Yes.
a clear, understandable, quantifiable relationship between what is happening inside the brain and
what could be, yeah.
And these aspects of, you could say, our subjective experience.
Yes.
Did you find anything out about this, Mikey's question about faster though? Did anything come?
Like, if you can speed it up somehow?
Yeah, if you could speed it up.
Okay, so here's this cool neuroscience technology also coming up. So there are tools now which can zap your brain, right? The TDCS or transcranial magnetic stimulation. So it's possible. So if in meditation studies we do find that, okay, these brain regions are activated more so, and then perhaps a neurofeedback of some kind could help. But again, I think it may not fast it up, but it may, like I've seen a lot of people who come to meditation who would do it for a week, probably in the first week of January, because that's their New Year resolution. And by February, they are out of it. So if they have this kind of, again, probably these, I'm not saying these people, like probably people like, I also do the same thing, I meditate and then I forget about it. But when I'm about to forget about it and I'm giving up, then if there is a marker which says, oh, by the way, you almost reached, here, just in case you want to go on maybe a week more, perhaps you can go further up. Absolutely, that's the thing I'm talking about, being the plaster. It's good. But after that, you have to get rid of it and go on.
Thank you. So we have time for, what is time? We're going to take a couple questions from the audience. Winslow. And hello. Oh, nice. Okay. Is there a microphone? Someone who wants to run around with a microphone? Oh, yes. Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks. So when I first learned about the Shamatha project, it seemed like an amazing opportunity to study progress, as Mikey has been kind of delving into up there. Was any discussion had during the planning about trying to operationalize enlightenment or progress towards it? And why didn't that end up happening in the project?
Okay, so unfortunately, I was out of the planning stage. I was at Google. I should have been there with them, but no. But I don't know if you know Clifford Saron. He's a very hardcore scientist, hardcore neuroscientist.
He's not the guy that would do. He's not the guy that would do an enlightenment research.
Maybe eventually, but right now he's being a scientist. You want to measure things you can measure, or at least define. And I bet you can get 3,000 definitions of enlightenment every time. So until we can define it properly, and maybe we can never, I don't know. Scientific studies are hard. But no, I don't know about the planning stage. Maybe there was some discussion.
Hi. So as somebody who's been a Buddhist all her life and somebody who's also becoming more interested in cognitive science lately, I'm really curious to know where you kind of think the research will go next, sort of what maybe the next frontier to look into would be, and sort of what the method would be to get there.
I think there are multiple areas of research. So meditation, we started with meditation just to see if we can define it in some scientific way. So the scientific measure is like focusing your attention or regulating emotion and stuff. And then we try to find out, okay, what kind of are the cognitive enhancement or the other way around with meditation training. And now one line of research is trying to go into brain disorders, either psychiatric disorders or other kind of mental health disorders, where is it possible to apply some form of meditation, maybe not as is, maybe not the hardcore Zen meditation, but some easier way to be done in kids with ADHD or other kids. And the other research is going more into the how and what is changing in the brain with better technologies, with better experiments. Can we decipher what the brain is doing when you're meditating? And then there is other field which is trying to study a very cool phenomena. I think we should have focused on it even before, and the phenomena is intent. What is the intention behind, like what are the neural correlates of intention? So like ethics where morality lies and stuff like that. So I think those things have to come in together. Like really, really quickly, and I love to share this. This is from Alan Wallace's book. He says if you want to see stars using telescope, you need a better stable stand. That's your focus attention. And you also have to make sure your lens does not have dust on it. And that's the ethics. So we need both.
Thank you, and thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. When I was doing Vipassana, and I try to do it twice a year, my teacher, who's a Buddhist and Sufi teacher, talked a lot about the combination between the mental center, the emotional center, and the physical center. And what we talk about right now is more the mind and measuring the mind, whereas what he was saying and what that tradition says is you can reach that point and awakening only through separating and trying to understand and control all the three centers and understanding how your brain basically controls your emotional center and your physical center. Is there any study that was done around that, and can you comment on it, or I'm totally off the grid with it?
No, it's interesting. But I mean, again, imagine science, you can only measure things you can measure. So when we talk about mental stuff, it's usually first-person perspectives. So when you say, when you have structured interviews where you're saying, okay, when I was meditating, and you're aware of your meditation, you're trying to stay away from negative thoughts or any kind of thoughts if a particular kind of meditation you're doing. So these are very, the mental aspect of it is still hard to measure. So when I talk about mental aspects, I'm talking about brain mechanisms that we can measure through neuroimaging, or some very coarse measure of their experience, very qualitative. So we can't really go to that aspect of when you say mental, there is no mental per se, it's only brain, as far as science is concerned.
From an Eastern traditional perspective, the mind and the heart is one thing. You know, it's one word, and it's connected. Yeah, my practice is very much about being in the body and understanding, receiving the full experience of the body and the mind. Yeah, so it's not connected. I mean, it's not disconnected in any way. And I think that's maybe one that there's more potential there in terms of study, how those two things are connected.
Actually, there was a study which is actually by Richie Davidson's group from Wisconsin Medicine, where they're actually looking at the physiology, anatomy of the heart and how it beats, and that could be related to meditators. It's pretty cool. In fact, he keeps telling this story. He said we went to Dharamshala in 1992 to meet with Dalai Lama and his monks, and when we put the cap on their head, they started laughing. They're like, "It's here."
There's even a picture of like all the monks like looking like,
what the heck are they doing?
So we have time for two more questions.
Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. This is fantastic. What role or impact have you seen people who have been exposed to religious environments and upbringing as they've pursued awakening, and to what scale based on the exposure that they had?
Wow, all yours.
That might be all two questions.
Boy, I don't know quite how to answer that. You know, I came from a religious, kind of a Christian background, even though that wasn't active in my life when I came to practice. But I know that I definitely was not looking for a religion. So that's why the teacher's response was so impactful for me. I'm learning how to be a human being. I think that when we talk about, when at least I talk about spirituality, I'm talking about connecting to that which is most fundamental about me, my deepest intention, my deepest aspiration, my deepest sense of my experience of being alive in this moment. And I think, boy, I don't know, but I don't know how to, I don't know, I mean, everybody's coming from such different places. I think that I think that the Buddhist tradition and spiritual paths have can have a lot of wisdom in them, and I also think that that there's a tremendous opportunity to learn and take, as Mikey mentioned earlier, there's a lot of good stuff out there, and if we could just focus more on beyond religion, beyond this form, and try to understand, well, what helps us be who we really need to be, what helps us be a human being, what helps us kind of actually just help each other learn how to do that, and learn, and then we'll be much better off. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't even know if it gets in the territory of your question, but that's what's coming up for me.
It's really, really quick. I mean, just to add a tiny bit on top of that, or on the bottom of that, is that every religion does talk about ethics and ethical living, right? As far as my tiny information about religions. So if that's the case, and then you're actually, ethics is not just when we talk about ethics and like how I behave with others. Ethics is also ethics towards your mental process. So if you're keeping negative thoughts in your head, that's unethical. So that's how I think about it. So if you apply that simple rule, be ethical in your physical behavior and your mental behavior, and the best way to be in physical behavior is easy probably, mental is the hardest, and that's when meditation comes in and rescue. So that's what my take on it, and I'm pretty sure every religion will be happy with it.
All right, we got time for one. Oh, we already got it over there.
Is this on? Hi, thanks for your time. There we go. I am curious to hear your perspective from Buddhist perspective about psychedelic drugs. I know there's a lot of dabbling within this community, and I see that as potentially risky personally. I'm just curious what your perspective on that is.
Well, I know that psychedelic drugs were definitely part of my path, and it became somewhat of for a while in my life, like kind of a reference point or kind of a sense of possibility. Oh wow, I didn't even know that was possible, you know, and I just saw, you know, that. And so I think that, you know, I gave this is part answer here and part follow-up on what Manish just said. I gave a talk recently on technology and practice, Buddhist practice, and I said that I want my technology to help me not kill, not steal, not take something from somebody else that's not given to me, not to practice in the world. So to be in a relationship with other people and actually be a positive, beneficial, awakening force there. I don't think a person on psychedelics can actually realize the full capacity of their human life to do that if they don't on a psychedelic drug. I think they can have insights, but then they have to come into the world and they have to relate and be a powerful, beneficial force for other people. And if you don't have if you don't have access to the full capacity of your being, you're going to be very limited in that. That's my sense.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Mikey.